I'm so tired.
Yeah, that's the only way to describe it.
Welcome back to the Growing Band Director Podcast. This is episode number 183. We basically want to just talk about how our year's gone and what we're going to do differently next year and all that.
And all that
So,
jazz.
For people who kind of don't know what you do here, would you fill them in?
Sure. So hi, for those of you who don't know, my name is Joey Hendricks. I'm one of the other band directors here in the Westbrook School District. At the high school, which I'm at in the mornings, I teach an intro to band class, a couple of the guitar labs, piano lab. I also help assistant direct the marching band. I run the jazz lab band. And then in the afternoons, 4 days a week, I go to the middle school, excuse me, and I help teach the beginning 5th grade band. We do that in sectionals. 7th grade saxophone and flute sectionals this year, and also help co-teach 8th grade band. So do a lot of the things.
Yeah. There's sort of a team of us that are, three of us between grades 5 and 12.
Yeah.
So
Takes an army.
So we're in our last couple of days of school here, and we're both needing some rest and
Some more
all
coffee.
that. Yeah, tons of it. Maybe some tea or things like that
Yeah.
too. So this has been a year. Like
Yeah.
it's been 100% a
Mhm.
year. Like it was going, first of all, it was a really tough year for a lot of reasons, but then like February turned into May. Like
Yeah.
all of a sudden it all just like went.
It went really quickly, but it's because we were going nonstop.
Yeah.
That definitely like it's felt like insufferably long while also like going by like that. Like I don't know how else to describe it.
Crystal and I usually talk about how it takes us like 2 weeks and for us in Maine, we don't end school until middle of June. So that's like basically July 4th weekend until we
Yeah.
feel like normal adult humans again. You know, there's like the perpetual waking up and going like, I'm still tired.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
not yet.
Yeah. When am I gonna feel rested?
When's your voice going to clear up?
Yeah, that's the real
I'm the one
question.
who's sick. So one thing I wanted to bring up is that we kind of have the same goal every year,
Mhm.
right? I feel like we just try to take where our students are at and say, let's grow them in every way possible for 20%.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
obviously we try to push something that now some years that ends in grade 5. In
Right.
some years in some ensembles that ends in grade 2.5,
Mhm.
right? It's
Yeah.
just like I think everybody feels like they have to get to a certain point,
Mhm.
and we don't feel that way.
No.
Maybe because we don't have somebody telling us where we have to reach.
Mhm.
But like we have years where one of our ensembles is maybe weaker than the other, or weaker than it's been in the past, and then some years where certain sections, certain ensembles are much stronger.
Mhm.
Well, that's just an easy course correction. We see that coming, and
And you plan ahead and you pick
I
accordingly.
feel like
Yeah.
everybody. Okay, that's probably unfair. I feel like a lot of people feel like every year needs to be the same.
Mm.
And I know, especially the younger you go in your course blueprints, quote unquote, you have a certain month or week that you typically teach, say, eighth notes. And
Right.
then, okay, here's where we're going to teach the note B flat or whatever it is for
Mhm.
whatever section you have. And I know that's important.
Yeah.
But I think it's important also just to keep the end goal in mind. Like right at the beginning of the school year, if you take, okay, these are the kids I have, where do I think they can get to? Right.
Mhm.
And then depending on how the year's going, like how you get there is almost doesn't have to be the same all the time.
It rarely is. Yeah.
And I had some good examples of this driving in, but of course I didn't write them down. So I need to think for a minute. You want to
Classic.
vamp?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, you saying that reminded me of our 7th grade band this year and like I was, a little bit involved with the planning. Crystal did most of it, but we were at a point after our winter concert, introducing the new music for like the spring concert, and we had passed out this one piece that were like, well, maybe we'll see how it goes, whatever, thinking like it would be something that would take them some time. And they learned like it was called Fighting Falcon March, and they learned it in like a week, and we all went, oh, we need to program some more. Like they're learning this faster than we thought. So it's like, definitely we can go into it thinking we know exactly what our ensembles will need and what they will or will not succeed in. But, sometimes kids either will practice or just latch on to something more than we think, or either we can underestimate where we think they are and then they surprise us and then we correct. Because it could have been easy to be like, well, that stinks. We picked those 3 songs, so I guess here we are. But we were able to then add another song, try to teach them more complicated things. And, I think it's important to be flexible in those moments. Like, yes, you could be in love with whatever program you put together, but if it either is not serving what they need or something that's not going to last the however many months you have
Yep.
before performances, then like you have to adjust and correct and make it more valuable and meaningful for them, not just well, this is what I planned. Sorry.
I know a lot of young teachers too, like the less experienced you are, that's harder and harder to do. Like, how do you know if they're just kind of fighting through what they need to succeed in the piece,
Right.
or whatever it is you're doing, or it's actually not a good match for them and you need to change,
Mhm.
And I don't think there's one answer for that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I guess for the younger teachers who are like trying to debate that from time to time, I guess I would say go with your instinct, because
Mhm.
there's something to be said for, especially if you're newer in a program, pulling a piece from a band kind of deflates them sometimes if they don't completely trust you yet.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
When I've had to pull a piece, I've been here long enough to be able to say, look, this was a me error. Like, I just want to try something else. Sometimes I don't even tell them we're pulling it.
Right.
I'll just stop rehearsing it. I won't even collect it. I'll just be like, oh, we have another piece now we're going to work on too. And then all of a sudden, a month later, they're like, are we going to play this? I'm like, no, maybe later. They're like, okay, because they love the other piece now.
Right.
Or,
Yeah.
or whatever it is. One thing that I'm noticing a lot, and I'm sure I'm not the only teacher in the country who's thinking this, is that kids' memory is not good.
Correct.
Not
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And when they remember the things,
It's a good day.
then it's like, wow, we're killing. This is great. We can do all these things.
Mhm.
But 6 minutes later, it could be not.
Yeah.
Right. Which is stressful for us because you hear your band, you're like, how do we not do this? Like, we've done this so many times in so many different ways. It's just a matter of them not remembering.
Yeah.
But when they, as they say, get locked in, like, then they're fine.
Mhm.
And then it's just they're not locked in all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's especially tricky because, in this day and age of technology and social media and everything, and not to like poo-poo social media, I also enjoy and look at the things, but my brain's fully formed. But like everything is
Kind of.
science told me
I
25,
know.
so we're fine. But everything they're used to like doing on their phones and even like hanging out with friends is such like quick short form stuff. So it's like they don't have to necessarily like sit and like consume a book or a movie. And not to say that kids don't do that anymore. Like where there's plenty of kids that love to read. But
Yeah.
if we're generalizing here,
Yeah.
they're so used to just like seeing something quickly and then it's gone. They forget about it. So that's kind of like how their brains are in a sense wired to be. So it's like, yeah, one day during a rehearsal, you could say, hey, mark that accidental, make sure it's sharp. And then the very next class, they make the same mistake and you tell them to circle it. And then the next class, they still miss it again. And we're like, what more can you do?
Put a triangle around
like,
it.
yeah, it's like,
I'll say circle it until I say stop circling.
yeah, honestly. And like, yeah, like we've had this conversation. I've had this conversation with Crystal. We're just like, how else can we get kids to remember accidentals other than writing it in, circling it, reminding them? But then that doesn't work. What's the next step?
Mhm.
Like that's a hard battle to fight sometimes when it's
So there's
that
some
should
things I've
be
done
the
differently
progression.
that in reaction to that, knowing kids don't remember anything.
Mhm.
One thing is I'll just talk music theory. I know probably a lot of band directors don't teach a quote unquote music theory class, but for my music theory class, we did a lot this year, like we typically would do. We got through, we kind of stopped the secondary dominant. So we did a lot of harmony. We did lots of instrument ranges. We did a lot of arranging for all the different groups
Mhm.
and all this. But I found that they didn't remember stuff as much as we had covered it.
Right.
So in this last month or so, as I was dealing with a final, like having kids take finals when they don't remember anything is always a struggle.
Right.
But
Yeah.
that's why I think it's great for them, because it's like telling them they need to remember something.
Mhm.
But one thing that I did is I basically just narrowed what they had to do on their final. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, let's just go with what's essential.
Right.
So for me, it was like they had to be able to arrange this little chorale for certain instruments.
Mhm.
And then they had to, we like focused on chords and key signatures,
Mhm.
in a bunch of different ways. But I used to do that plus a bunch of other stuff
Right.
that it's just like, okay, they can't remember it all.
Mhm.
So, or at least they're not remembering it all. And I don't want them to leave with like a failing grade because their memory is bad.
Right. For sure.
Because it's not their fault, even though it's their fault, but it's not their fault.
Right.
So,
And like there's definitely a difference between being capable and remembering. Like Obviously, we're not saying, well, these kids nowadays aren't capable of doing these things. They are. It's just it doesn't stay retained
Hmm.
for whatever reason.
Their brains have been rewired.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, for our playing finals, one thing that we're doing differently is, especially with our older kids, like the memorization thing is huge.
Hmm.
Like we're asking them to learn, and depending on the class, like asking kids to memorize stuff is a great exercise in that.
100%.
Because obviously when they have to memorize it, they practice it a lot more,
Hmm.
right? So then that F sharp should be remembered because they're like going over and over and over again.
So it becomes like muscle memory. Yeah.
Talking to them about recording themselves when they practice the B major scale, right?
Hmm.
And like being as obvious as saying, um, the B major scale should sound like a major scale. And when you listen back, and because we do the exercise of like, I'll play on the piano or my instrument, raise your hand when you hear a wrong note in a scale, and I'll play a couple correct, and then I'll play some wrong notes. And
Right.
they almost all can hear when it's a wrong note.
Hmm.
So it's like, okay, record yourself playing the E major scale. Does that sound like a major scale? Because so many times we'll go, oh, I got it right. And it's like, no, you didn't.
No, listen back.
There's
Yeah.
4 sharps and you played one of them, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that recording themselves, but just having kids memorize more stuff is something that I've been doing. And personally, I've been using like patriotic tunes, tunes from our country, military theme tunes, just because again, they also don't know a lot about history sometimes too. So
Yeah.
to me, it's like a way to kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. They're kind of like learning about something that's bigger than themselves while also having to memorize stuff.
Yeah. No, that all makes sense, especially because like it's important to remember that we're not just teaching them like notes and rhythms specifically for performances. Like there's so much that comes out of what we do, whether it's the history aspect of it or just organizational skills or being able to hear outside of yourself to work with others. Like there's so much that can be taught in a way like that that seems simple but will be effective for them down the line.
And the whole remembering thing, like we in my ensemble, we talk about playing within your trio,
Mhm.
right? Which might
Yeah.
be 2 people on either side of you, or some variation of that. And you can tell right away when they're not. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's like me, 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 me. The minute you say play within your trio, it's like boom.
Mhm.
It's so much better.
Yeah. And that can happen at every grade level. I remember this blew my mind last year. Like it was one of our first 5th grade band full rehearsal, which is always chaos because it's, if you have 90 to 100 10-year-olds with instruments in a room. And they played something and it was like they all just played loud and crazy and whatever. And Crystal just said, all right, listen to a different section. Like if you play saxophone, listen to the flutes. Flutes, try listening to the trumpets. They did the same thing again, immediately sounded better, like with barely any instruction. And like I remember sitting there like, what? You just told them to listen and they did it. And
Yeah.
which is stuff I know and like have taught that way, but like it's different when you hear like 10-year-olds do it and hear that like immediate change.
And what
so
they're really
important.
doing is they're thinking about something greater than themselves, and
Yeah.
they're part of something bigger than themselves.
Right.
Which I think is also a good lesson for people, because a lot of people are very selfish. It's like everything is about me all the time.
Right. I mean, especially in those early years, it's like you're growing up and it's like, I need to learn how to do this. I need this. And
That's why things
That's
like
part of
band
life.
and sports and all these other things are good.
Yeah.
Because you have to be part of a team and all that.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about programming ahead of time, like that learning process.
Which I'm starting to get better at.
You're doing it.
Yeah. I see your face. That's fun.
Well, no, because, and I know some people don't know what they're going to get year to year.
Right.
Like I know there's all these districts in the country that are so different from where we teach. Like we're a tiny little town of 16,000 people, or maybe 20 or something like that.
Right.
And, our high school is less than 700 kids. And,
Mhm.
There's one middle school that feeds one high school.
Right. That's
And
right.
I'm married to the band director, and you and I share an office, and
Yes.
you and her share an
Share an
office.
office, yeah.
So like we know all of the kids coming up and not coming up, and
Mhm.
we can literally look at grades 8 through 11 and say that's high school band next year.
Yeah.
Now I know that's not easy for a lot of people, but the programming ahead allows you to like digest and think about things long term. Like you were just talking about your closer, which is going to be the Sigler arrangement of Big Swing Face
Yep.
for our jazz lab band.
Mhm.
Great blues from the Buddy Rich library. And you love that tune, and it's a great
One of my
great
favorites,
teaching
yeah.
tune. But you want to use it last with the program of how things are going to go at festivals.
Mhm.
So you have the time to go, oh, I want it to end differently. Like I want it to end like a closer would end.
Mhm.
So we're just going to do a quick change of the ending.
Yeah.
and we're not going to like change the chart. We're just going to
No.
change a little bit so it has that
It's
strong
more
ending.
like the original version of it. Yeah.
You know, and it allows you to like sleep on the programs.
Yeah.
And go like, you know what? I don't like this tune as much as I thought it did for
Yeah.
these kids. Or it allows us to go, okay, we might have a senior piano player in our second jazz band. Let's try to find something that would work as a ballad that's a piano feature, right? And then you have the ability to like pick through it. Like when you go to the grocery store, you just pick the first banana and go. Or do you kind of like look through them and
You
kind
have
of
to
go,
look through,
okay, I
yeah,
like this
absolutely.
bunch. Oh, I want the organic ones or like whatever it is. So that planning ahead allows you to do that.
Yeah.
And then as you keep listening to music, I'll bet you kind of go, oh man, I like this chart so much. And then the question is, do I like it more than one of the ones that are on there? And if I don't, then I'm going to just, okay, I'm going to write it down on my list for why I like it and to use it, but not right now. Or sometimes it's like, okay, I like this better than my ballad, so I'm going to move it or my opener or whatever.
I mean, yeah, I mean, and that's definitely a tricky thing to do, especially if you're new in a district. Like I feel like for last year's lab band, not last year's lab band was a different story because I had, I think, total 10 kids. Like we really had to do like it was more like
we've had as many as
heads
3 jazz bands here.
Right.
But with COVID, we came back and got together one jazz band. And then the year after we got a second one.
Right. So last year's was more like, okay, what can we water down to make work? And then this year, this being my second year in the district, I did know more of the 8th graders coming up, but still was on the newer end of it. So I know it definitely took me a little bit longer to find the charts I thought would work for them. Like I think it was what, a week or two before we started that I was like, okay, I'm finalized now. We got it. And I think now that, you know, I've now finished year 2, I've worked with this current 8th grade now for 2 years and we'll know them as freshmen. Like the things you just talked about, like, and I have done a lot of listening and reprogrammed and shuffle things around, but like I feel like I already have a pretty solid idea of like what they're going to be able to accomplish and do. So like leaving the school year right now, I am kind of programmed for the starting next late fall, early winter. And you know, over the summer, you're right. I might do a lot of listening, might change my mind. I have changed the ballad like 3 times. The opener the concept has changed multiple times. I might give them, I really love Mr. PC, but I think you're right. I think that's easier than what some stuff they did this year. So I might be like, hey, here's a warm-up chart where it's gonna like play in rehearsal to get us going. So
it can also be a melody that you learn by ear.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that too. So I think it's the more, not just me, anyone's like in a program and can get to know the kids more. And if any other schools are in the fortunate position to like work with the kids in middle school and then also transition to work with them in high school, that'll just get easier and easier every year because it's like I know where they are.
There's just some people who don't think ahead. They're like, oh yeah, my kids don't know this when they're, well, did you teach them last year? Did you talk to people about how like what you'd like them to know? And not that your job is to tell other people what to do, but like to have that conversation.
So that connection with the middle school is huge. And I think it's something a lot of people don't think about enough.
Yeah.
Because like, yeah, as a high school director, yes, you want to teach them more complex skills and get them to that next step. But if you don't communicate and work with, not like you said, and it's not like you don't go to your middle school teacher and say, hey, you need to do this. But like, if you have an open conversation, say, hey, what skills are you working on, and kind of see where they are so you can, like you said, plan ahead. I think that connection is just huge.
One thing I think we try to do too, or at least I'll say I try to do with you, is because it's your band and I want you to program it the way you want to program it.
Right.
But I always hear these charts and I like go like, hey, listen to these, listen to these.
I have a whole list. Yeah. Could you send me stuff or like I find something? I think I have like 15 charts on like a notepad in my phone right now. I'm just like, oh, I want to do all of these, but
it's so hard, right? You want to do all of them. That's why we now basically play all year long with a lot of the kids. Because like there's just so many. If you can get to 20, 25 charts in a year, that's great. If you're doing 3 or 4, it's like you're kind of so limited. So you have to make sure it's like great stuff.
Yes. Like this year's, I think, a band for both of us, or for next year rather, that, you know, we have the festival charts, but we could also work on other things. Like I know you're going to do Essentially Ellington again. We could maybe, you know, try to learn another chart or so for the jazz night at the end of the season. Like I feel like we're starting to get into a position where that could be more feasible rather than just festival stuff. Do it again on jazz night. Kind of.
So like a thought, I mean, this might be a stupid thought, but like we're going to do, or at least unless I change it, we're planning on doing the original Moten Swing.
Yeah.
The middle of the year as like our festival opener. There's a great Sweeney Moten Swing that I did with the second band like over 10 years ago. Like what if we both did Moten Swing at the same time?
Ooh.
You know what I mean? Like that's an option. So what I wanted to mention about like, I try to throw stuff your way because I think professionally, if there's something I see that I like, I want you to I don't want to like hide it and go, I'm not going to tell him.
Yeah.
He's got to find it for himself,
Right.
you know?
Which is
So,
something I'm trying to get better at too.
so I hope that when I send it to you, you feel like the option to use it or not use it.
Yeah.
Right. So, because I want to make sure it's your group. Like you're not just doing it and then we're programming for you. Like it's your
Right.
ensemble. So
Yeah. I think at the beginning of the year I felt that a little bit, but then the more I thought about it, I'm like, oh no, like this is we're a team. This is great. Give me more.
Yeah. And you know, we have the basic concepts we're always trying to work on, like reading, swing concepts, all the swing concepts, and improvisation.
Yeah.
Like it's all the same no matter what grade level you're in. And you kept saying, well, there's all these eighth graders. In the middle school jazz band was predominantly eighth graders this year.
I'm so excited.
So you're excited. She's not.
I know.
You know, and if you think of those middle school teachers, so if you're a high school teacher, like every 4 years, like hopefully you're not rebuilding. Like hopefully you're always continually, you don't go 4 years and go, okay, now what are we going to do? You know, like you're continuously planning. But
and it's you know, it's not a plateau. There's some peaks and maybe some valleys. But
like
like
for middle school jazz band, say you start a 7th grade bass player. I know sometimes she'll start a 6th grader and they take lessons so that, but really
By 7th
they
grade,
typically
already,
don't play until 7th grade.
Mhm.
It's like a 2-year cycle and then you're out.
Yeah, it's really quick.
So, you know, that newness is always a thing, but like once they start getting a little more competent, you say goodbye to them.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
well, especially because we had this realization yesterday that there's a bunch of current 7th graders who didn't do jazz band, but definitely should have. And so they've been doing like small group projects together. And like this one group of like 3 saxophones and a couple percussionists, we're doing like the Cantina band thing, which has like, it's not like really swing, but there's some swing stuff in there. And they were playing it and we were all like, and they like were like, oh, this one measure's kind of hard. The bump, 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 bump. And I was like, you know, you'd be better at it if you join jazz band. I'm like, or are you trying to promote it? And they're like, yeah, but it's early in the morning. And we're like, yeah, but just 2 days a week, you're fine.
You're
Like,
fine.
You're fine. So hopefully that ball can keep rolling.
I wanted to go back and mention something that you mentioned briefly was your first year of doing the jazz lap band. Because before COVID, we had 20 to 35 kids in the second band. And then we had a top band of 18 to 22 or whatever it was. Like there was a lot of kids. Then COVID hit and everything changed. And then when we came back, it was like, okay, and we had a fire in the building. So we were actually gone for 689 days or something like that between band rehearsals. So when you took on that jazz lab band, it was a combo. Like it wasn't a jazz lab band.
Correct.
But a lot of people would have said, we don't have a jazz band yet. Let's wait.
Right.
Let's wait. Let's not do this yet. But what you did is you took charts that were basically head charts with basic easy stuff. And you got the kids who wanted to play playing because you knew that this year is 10, next year is going to be 16. Right. And then this next year is going to be 25 or
if you take a year off of something, like kids aren't going to come back. Like I'm going to quote something and I'm going to forget immediately what it is and you're going to make fun of me. But like if you build it, they will come. Yeah. It will come. Like that's
Field of Dreams.
Thank you so much. It was there. I just couldn't get there. But it's like, if we were to say, you know what? Yeah, we're not have a jazz band this year. We'll try again next year. Sure. Like some of the incoming freshmen we could have gotten or whatever. But a lot of the kids I had in jazz band this year, we also were like, hey, you've never played in jazz? Try it this year, and like got them hooked. So I think that's from, word of mouth, from it existing and it being there. So
yeah, when you open up the space, that gives opportunities for kids to come in.
Yeah.
The year we had 3 jazz bands, it was only 1 year, but we had like a really strong senior group. I think this was 2010, 11, long time ago. And then we had a really strong group of sophomores and juniors. And we wanted that second band to be a really good band.
Right.
Because the third band was a full band. We just had to have like a guitar player play bass or something like that. And that was a great year. The top band was really great, but the second band was smoking.
Yeah.
Like they played real bassy stuff and they sounded like most other first jazz bands. Like they sounded almost like a pro group. And something, I don't know if you heard this, that Julius Tolentino said in the episode I did with him, number 171, maybe.
Get that promo.
Programming of Music of Substance. Because his band just won Essentially Ellington. So we're talking about different levels here,
For
right?
Sure. Very close,
right.
But it's
you threw me off guard.
Sorry.
So he said, to his students, he said, yes, like you sound like professionals right now. Like this band sounds like a professional band, but professionals don't rehearse. Like we're rehearsing all the time.
Yeah.
So let's value this rehearsal time. But if you're a professional, you're expected to come in and sound like this without rehearsal.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
And I never heard that before. I thought that was really cool.
I never have thought of that. Because as a calling myself a professional is silly, but like I've been paid to play. So
You
it
make
counts.
money, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. But it's like even earlier this year we had that jazz night event that Sue put on as fundraising for the choir.
Swingorama.
Thank you.
Yep. Swing dance.
You know
and
me with
music.
remembering names. The
Yep.
Swing Mama, yeah. And she asked me to play with the Opus One band, and I did. But it's like we went in, we read through each chart once, and we're like, all right, great, we're gonna do the gig tonight. And it wasn't a lot of rehearsing. And to me, that's like become just like nature of like getting gigs and stuff.
Mhm.
But I've never like put that into like consideration with comparing it to what we do here, because what we do here feels like two separate worlds sometimes.
Yeah, and that's why at least with our top ensemble, most experienced ensemble, we'll do grade 4 and 5, and like we'll do hard stuff.
Yeah.
But especially with the jazz ensemble, like there's a lot of times in the year where they're playing grade 2.
Yeah.
Because I want them to read it once and perform it,
Mhm.
or memorize the tune and perform it,
Right.
or learn the head by ear, and then kind of do the tune with very little rehearsal time.
Mhm.
Right? To me, that quantity, not over quality, but over difficulty,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
is really helpful.
Getting them to play more is sometimes, and more repertoire is sometimes
Yep.
more important than trying to strive for the hardest thing possible.
Because we have gigs starting in August, and then the last gig is like first weekend in
June.
June. So they're basically playing all year long, and we try to include as many kids as possible.
Yeah.
Like we don't cut kids from our program.
Yeah.
Like,
What's the spring jazz again this year? Like 40?
right? So you're like, all right,
The
do you
backstage.
have room back there for 12 trumpets or 9 or whatever it was? And,
Yeah.
but you just want more kids to play. A,
Mhm.
because they all deserve to play if they want to play.
Right.
And also because like you never know who your top players are going to be next year.
That's true.
I mean, you think you know,
Mhm.
but what happens if this kid like gets this opportunity and then all of a sudden, takes off because of that, and then you're
Right.
like, whoa, okay.
Mhm.
And he tells a lot about the kids too, about like who takes the opportunities and who doesn't. Nothing against the kid who doesn't, but
For
like
sure.
the kid who takes more opportunities obviously is going to get more too.
Yeah.
So
100%.
things that we're going to do differently next year.
I mean, I think we sort of already talked about what we're going to do differently next year. Like, talked about how each year we just want to try to get them better. Like, we could try to think of specifics, but what we're doing is always trying to like meet the kids where they are, get them to the next, even necessarily next level or step, but just improving. And that's what we're trying to do.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.